Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? I don't need this artificial voice, do I? Yep. Good. That's great. Well, hey, we're thrilled that you're here. Thanks for being here. And in case you didn't know what we're talking about or where you are, we're talking about the story of a man. The question is, why the story of a man? I'll give you a quick reason why. 20, 30 years ago, I had no idea what a man was at all, but I was 40 years old. And the question is, where do I go from there? We don't know who you are and what you're doing. There's no problem. Most of the time, since men kind of live on an island, we're supposed to do it ourselves. You just kind of have to figure it out as you go. But then when you look in your wake, you see kind of a bunch of destruction that you have because you don't know what you were for and what you're all about. At one time, I was described as a lost, scared little boy. But yet I was in a man's body. He had no idea what the journey of a man looked like. That is why we gather together. That's what we're here today. It's kind of, we've been talking about this in the series of what are the growth patterns in God's economy, in God's world, what it looks like to be a man. And today we're talking about elderhood. But you know what happens before you get to elderhood? You have all these other steps to get there. And so what am I going to be like when I'm 60 years old like me? What did I do with my life? What decisions did I do? And that's why we're gathering. We're just sharing with men all the time what it looks like in a man's journey if you're living with God at the center of your life versus me scrambling all by myself to figure out life. What's the differences? And you're going to see and hear a lot about that today, about what it would look like kind of following God at the center, what's his purpose for men, versus how we just kind of figure it out as we go. We actually have a funny video here in a minute to show you that. But just want to let you know there's some coffee and donuts and things in the back. Feel free. The bathrooms are out that door. And after we show this video, which was kind of going to give a what possibility what some older men could look like, then we also have a very special guest today that's going to come up and give us a talk about his journey as a man. And then Scott's going to come up and just give us kind of what that whole journey looks like all the way through elderhood. So enjoy the video. Thanks that you're here, and we'll have a little debrief at the end too. Thank you.
Hey, Jill.
Oh, hi, Marge.
Hi, Dolores.
Hey, Marge.
So what's going on?
Oh, we're just doing a little husband bashing.
Sorry I'm late.
I have a beef dip.
Speaking of dips, I was just talking about Tim. I have got to find a way to make him more flexible.
You've got about as much chance of that as Marge digesting a beef dip.
Oh, boy. I'm dead.
Listen, if Tim is anything like Bob, he'll never change. Every night it's the same thing. 7 o'clock, where's the food? 7:05, you call that food? 7:15, why'd you let me eat so much food?
Tim does all that, and then he opens his pants, sticks out his gut, and belches.
Nobody is more set in his ways than Harry. Every Saturday night at 11:30 after the sports report, he wakes me up and asks the same question. You want to do it?
And they say romance is dead.
Been that way for 25 years. I wish he could be a little more spontaneous and skip a Saturday every once in a while.
Okay, well, I guess you both have it worse than I do.
Oh, no, you've got it worse. You're trying to start a new career and Tim keeps screwing it up.
Oh, it's only half a class.
Today, next thing you know, it'll be half a semester. The older men get, the more their routines take over your life.
Your friend's right. By the time they're his age, every minute of your day revolves around them.
Nope, it's 12 o'clock. Where's my lunch? Where's my water? Where's my bill?
Where's my life?
I can't believe I've been in college for 35 years. But all I have to do is finish the very last sentence of my dissertation, and I'll finally get my doctorate.
Doctor, are you taking me to the doctor?
I'm not taking you to the doctor. I'm trying to get my doctorate.
Who's going to take me to the doctor?
Nobody, you're not sick. Except in the head. Now let me work. The president of the university is going to be here any second.
Is he a doctor? I hope so.
Oh no, he's coming here to pick up my dissertation.
Why don't you just take it to him?
Because I have to be here to make your lunch and help you to the bathroom.
Well, just feed me lunch in the bathroom.
Better you have a lock in the bathroom.
Perhaps you old Betty.
What did you say?
Who remembers? Where's my lunch?
Oh, go make it yourself. I need a few minutes of peace and quiet to get this done.
Mother, you won't let me finish my shower. You've been in there for 35 years.
And you still stink.
Will you guys stop it? Aren't you ever gonna grow up?
I gotta tell you, it's not looking real appealing.
I'm glad we got a chance to laugh a little bit. In fact, before this video came up, we were laughing about the same old things this morning, getting older and things breaking down. I'm Ken Bird. I'm on the board for Awaken Heart, and I'm going to introduce you to somebody that's special to me. It's more special over the past year and a half or so. But Mike went through. Is it on? Can you hear me? Okay. My friend Mike here went through just an incredible journey over the past couple of years. And it's really to God's glory that he is going to be sharing some stuff this morning with us. Because a little bit ago, Mike was diagnosed with not only with leukemia, a dormant form, but also a disease called IPF, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which was basically a death sentence. His lungs were hardening up, and he was not, the diagnosis was either you get a lung transplant or that's the end. And so over this time, Mike was on oxygen, and he had to have more and more and more. And I watched this. He ended up going to Cleveland Clinic to be assessed as to whether or not he was eligible for a lung transplant. At that time, he was admitted because he was so sick into the hospital. They said he was on not nearly enough oxygen. And so he was going to be there. If they didn't give him the lung transplant, then he didn't have a lot of options. Well, he didn't have a lot of support in the area, so by God's grace, the woman that was in charge of the Cleveland Clinic called up her friend, who was the Henry Ford transplant here in Detroit, the head of that, and asked if they would take Mike in. And so, before we knew it, he was on a helicopter flying to Detroit. And he got in and met with the surgeon. He had to have more tests, and we're just praying, hoping that he would be put on the list to be a donor, and they did accept him. And then he went through, then he was waiting forever, right? You just wait, and he's getting worse and worse. And he went from 2 liters of oxygen to 40 liters of oxygen. So he was in bad shape. So he was raised up on the list, and he actually got, a lung came in. He was able to have surgery, but that wasn't the end of it, because that surgery is a big deal. And he went through, he was on a ventilator, he had to come off the ventilator. You don't want to be put back on a ventilator. Mike had to be put back on a ventilator. And then at that time, I don't know, by God's grace again, he just had an amazing, recovery and got off the ventilator. And let's just say that we went out for dinner and a movie, and I just, it's all God's glory. So we wanted to hear this morning, based on, what we're going to talk about today, a couple of the life lessons that Mike has learned through this. So, Mike is wearing the mask today because being in a whole group with a group of people, his immune system's pretty depressed right now.
Yeah, when you get a lung transplant, they shut down your immune system, because anytime you get something in your body, like, we've all watched war movies, somebody gets shot or something, and the body wants to reject it. And so you're getting something foreign in another organ that's not yours, your body wants to find it and get rid of it. So you have to take certain medications, drugs to suppress your system so it doesn't reject the organ. But, rehashing with Ken, what he was talking about was, how many coincidences can a man have in a short period of time? And it just, laying there, I would think about that, and that this is something divine going on here, whether I liked it or not, because I'm totally incapacitated, and the things that were happening, I had no control over it at all. I didn't make these things happen. They just happened. People came into the scene out of nowhere, and it was just a beautiful thing. I was the type of guy before the surgery, I really didn't rather standoffish. I didn't get close to people. I like doing things myself, and either you liked me or you didn't like me, or I didn't care. I wasn't that much into relationships at all. And then for some reason, I just, it dawned on me that I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for these relationships that I met, the doctors, Ken, being at my side, Awakened Hearts. And I pretty much rejected all these things before. God would put people in my life, I would reject it. He put a job in my life, somewhere down the line I would rebel, always rebelling. And I just said to myself, this has got to stop. You just got to let go and let God be in charge of your life. And I noticed this, if I kept my focus on Jesus, my recovery would start to rise. As soon as I would panic or have anxiety over what was going on and poor me's, I would start to dip. And that just made me realize how important having a relationship with Jesus Christ is. Like, I knew about Jesus, but I didn't know Jesus. Now I'm starting to get to know him. Because there's no way these things that were happening to me were just a coincidence. You don't have helicopters come and pick you up and take you to another hospital. It just doesn't work that way. So then I started thinking, all these resources that the Lord had given me in the past that I rebelled against. I took for granted all these resources. Because I started thinking about my lungs. Totally took it for granted. Because I smoked like a fiend, drank a lot. I didn't take care of myself. One of God's greatest resources to us is our bodies. And really wasn't taken care of. Because when you think about it, your lungs are the only organ that have access to the outside, the air. Your kidneys don't, your liver, pancreas, Your lungs is the only thing that's connected to the outside. Breathing in all the time. So that's another thing, was the resources, the houses that were given to me, the people he put in my life. I took it all for granted. You know, there's a reason for these people being in your life. And being the type of individual I was, I would reject these people. I always trying to find a fault in somebody. You know, basically probably trying to find some kind of weakness in them, you know, which would give me power over you, which might work for a little while, but when you get in a situation I was in, it doesn't work anymore, you know. So when I finally started to let go and let God work in my life, things just started to smooth right out. You know, all the anxiety would leave. You know, I was at more peace with myself. And what I wanted, my goal now is just to get as close to Jesus as I can. I can't even begin to tell you how important that is. I have no words for it. It's something that I experienced. I wish everybody could experience it themselves, not maybe as drastic. But He's there, He loves you, and it's so free to experience that. It's unbelievable. But to me, relationships are everything now. Everything. I don't take anybody for granted that I meet. There's a reason for that person being in your life. And I bet you any money God put that person in your life for a reason. And I went back and I started connecting dots. You know, I learned that here about connecting dots. You know, and, well, that person came into my life, but I spit that person out. This job came in, but hey, I didn't like it, you know. Never gave anything or anybody a chance. You know, which was telling me I didn't trust Jesus at all. I wasn't trusting Him. So how can I call myself a Christian? I think I had a relationship with Christ when I didn't even trust Him. So if you're pushing people away, you're not trusting. You know, I know I wasn't. So, and I almost threw away Wigan Hearts. You know, and that, boy, if it wasn't for these guys, I don't know where I'd be. You know. Now here's something I found. This is for Kim. It says, friendship isn't about whom you have known the longest. It's about who came and never left your side. And this man is by my side. Every step of the way. And it was great. And to think that I almost threw that away scares the hell out of me. You know? So I hope you guys keep coming back and learn things that I get here and start connecting the dots. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. And again, for Kim's commitment, Mike Carter here today. So God used him in a great way there. Just picking up off where Mike left off, these Saturday mornings are really twofold purpose. First of all, to connect men to God through Christ. That's what Mike was talking about here. We have no hope of connecting to God apart from Christ. And so we want men to know Christ so that they can know God. Apart from Jesus, there's no way to God. But then secondly, we want to offer men hope and direction for the masculine journey towards God. We connect with God, but now we begin to move our life towards Him. And what I like that Mike said is that this journey is not an individual journey. We travel together, encouraging each other along the way. And so that's what these Saturday mornings are about. Connecting men to God through Christ, and then helping men join us on the spiritual journey towards God through care and concern for one another. Now, in order to do that, what we've been here, this thing is backwards on me. We've been talking about the story of a man. What does that journey look like? And we said that this story of a man has 5 chapters. What happened there? Where did Denny? Can you get that back on the presentation? Thank you. It has 5 chapters. The first one is boyhood, 0 to 16, and we talked about there are certain things that are to happen during that stage that moves us forward along the masculine journey. And if those things happen, then I go to the next stage, which is manhood, and I'm prepared for manhood, but manhood isn't just static, it's dynamic. Things are going to be happening in my life there that prepare me for the next chapter, which is fatherhood. 5 things happen in fatherhood which prepare me for the next stage of the masculine journey, which is elderhood. And then that prepares us for the final stage of the masculine journey, which we're going to call sainthood, which we're going to talk about next time, which is this: the most important day of a man's life. You think you've gone through the most important day of your life? Not yet. No man has. It's still here. There's a day coming that will be the most important day that you will face as a man. Now, where we're at, we are here on elderhood, 50 and plus. And one of the things that we have said is all along the way, there are different words in the Bible that all are translated in the Old Testament, Hebrew, in our English, man. Sometimes they're translated with other words, but mainly man. But it's interesting that Zakar, strong man, describes what a boy is in front of him. He is here to use the strength and power that God has put within him to reflect God's life-giving power. And then the warrior man, Gabor. Man was here to engage his world, to make a difference. And then the wounded man, Enosh. When a man is a warrior long enough, he gets wounded. And that prepares him for fatherhood. And then after that, we have Zakan, the mature man. That's what we're going to talk about today. And then finally, Adam, the recreated man. God is doing this work of redeeming our masculinity. That's what the masculine journey, that's what discipleship, that's what spiritual formation are all about. Now, so far, we've looked at the first 3, as I said, boyhood, Zakar. And what we said is, to put it in a nutshell, what's to happen in boyhood is all about learning to receive grace from those around us and to use the power that God has given us as men to personally care for ourselves. Okay? I can't give grace if I don't learn how first to receive it. And I will not know what power can do is if I first don't learn to take responsibility for myself by using my power. But it doesn't stop there. Gabor is the next step in the chapters, manhood. And here we learn not to receive grace, but here we now begin to learn, in addition to receiving grace, to giving grace. And to using our power justly for the care of ourselves and the care of others. So in boyhood, it's all turned on me. And manhood, I'm still taking care of myself, but now I'm beginning to look outside of me. And then fatherhood, what's to happen there, Enosh? It's learning to give grace and use power, not just justly, but now sacrificially. Why? To provide a God-centered environment where his family can flourish. Here's where a man really begins to reflect God, because what did God do in Genesis 1? God created an environment, and he placed us in it as his children and said, thrive. That's what a father does. He uses his power and he uses grace and he gives grace to create an environment where his marriage and his family can thrive. Now today we're going to look at elderhood. And what we're saying here is this. It's giving grace and using power, not just justly, not just sacrificially, but wisely. Who? For myself? No. For the sake of my family? Well, that's still there, but now it begins to expand beyond his family to the community in which he's part of. But not just his community, but to the powerless, the orphans and widows, as the Old Testament we're talking about, that are part of his community. So you see, as the story goes, we move inward, we begin to look outward, we become sacrificial, and now we deal with what we deal with as men wisely. Even though we're getting smaller and withering as we get older as men, there's something inside our masculinity, what God has made us to be, begins to expand. That's God's plan. Now, what I want to do to begin with is I want to begin to, first of all, identify our generation. Baby boomers, 1945 to 1960. Any baby boomers here? Any, what would be the great generation before 1945? I met Doug. Doug, what, you said you're 77? So Doug's part of the great generation. We're just the baby boomers. Came along as a result of the great generation. The next is the Generation X, 1961, 1980. Are any of those guys here? Okay. And then we have Generation Y, 1981 to 1995. A couple of those guys here. Man, I was basically married, but you guys, I'm your dad, I guess. And then we have the Generation Z, born after 1995. Anybody here? Well, what I want to do is, whatever our generation, number of generations here, there's one inescapable reality, and that is this. You will become an old man. Barring a premature death, all of us are moving a long time to becoming the old men. P.G. Woodhouse said this: there's only one cure for not becoming an old man, in case you're wondering. It was invented by a Frenchman. It's called the guillotine. Now, apart from the guillotine or some other premature death, the question that we want to ask ourselves this morning is this: what kind of old man will I become? Whether you're part of Generation X, the baby boomers, the great generation, whatever it is, what kind of old man will I become? Will I become a grumpy old man? A dirty old man? A foolish old man? A selfish old man? A lonely old man? Or a wise old man? I've met a lot of the first five in my life. I haven't run into too many men that I would consider a wise old man. What I'm going to say this morning is, unless we take the initiative and are intentional, these first five are our default setting. In other words, this is what, as fallen men, we will eventually turn into. Inflexible, meaning we're not generous, or we're not gracious, my way or the highway, and ungenerous. We don't use our power sacrificially to bless others, we use it for ourselves. We become stingy with our power. Guys, that's our default setting. Now, what I want to say this morning is there is another default, which we're calling beyond default, another way, and that is the wise man who is both gracious and he is generous with his power. He doesn't live for himself and throw out the leftovers. He lives for others, using his power for the sake of the powerless. Walt Disney said, growing up is mandatory, but growing old is mandatory, but growing up is optional. That's true, isn't it? We're all going to get old, but are we going to get old still as little boys who are always there to take care of themselves, or mature to the point we get to that old man that is gracious and giving beyond himself to those in need around him? Today's thesis is not "get off my lawn." If you want to see a great default setting for an old man, watch that one. Our thesis today is this: while we can't stop from becoming old men, we can certainly determine the kind of old men we want to become. We can't stop becoming old, except we run into a guillotine. But we can determine the kind of old men we're going to become when we get there. Now how? Well, by setting a trajectory. Oops. I thought we cast those demons out. That takes us beyond the default setting. Remember, we're on a trajectory that if we don't do anything, we're going to become those old men that we've seen, that we say, I never want to be like him. So we got to set a trajectory that takes us beyond default. And I want to begin by asking, before we look at the trajectory, is what will that trajectory do? Where will it take us? Where will it move us? What does a beyond default old man look like? We know what a grumpy old man, we know what a dirty old man, a lonely old man, a foolish old man look like, but what does a wise old man look like? Well, in the Bible, the Old Testament, I said the word is zaken. Now the word zaken, literally means long beard or gray head or long gray beard. That's the idea of the word zaken. And you'll see this throughout the Bible, the word in your English with the word old man. Now, not all old men were Zakins, but some old men were. Now, in the Old Testament, Zakin describes not just any old man, as I said, but a wise old man. A man who, through years of pain and struggle in life, he faced life. He didn't run away from it. He didn't avoid it. He engaged it head on, and he felt the struggle, and he felt the pain. And he had successes, and he had failures. And as a result, he has learned how to trust God and to love well, while staying fully engaged. He doesn't run off to some desert and be a hermit. He lives fully engaged in this broken world with three things. Integrity. It means he doesn't pretend about anything. He doesn't pretend the world is worse than it is, that he is better than he is, or something else is different than what it is. He sees the world with honest eyes, with open eyes. But he not only engages the world with integrity, but also with weightiness. There's a sense of he is taking responsibility by using his power the way God has meant for him to use it. And as a result, there's a weightiness he feels, and people around him feel that weightiness. He's an anchor. He can make a difference in his world. But he's not a bully with his power. He's gracious. He is compassionate. He is caring with that power. And so he's not a bull in the china closet. He navigates through life with great effectiveness. That's a Zakin. A man through the years of pain and struggle has learned to trust God, love well, while staying fully engaged in this broken world with integrity, weightiness, and grace. A couple things else about the Zakin. In the Old Testament, the Zakin would always sit at the city gate, the main gate where people would come in, and all the community would come to him at that city gate. It was kind of like the place where the judge would sit, the county seat. And the Zakin was known for his grace and his just use of power for the sake of the powerless. You would go to him, and because he has lived an engaged life and has gained some wisdom to know how the world works, and to know how to use his power and how to give grace, he would sit at the city gate and decide cases, decide things that people would bring, problems that people would bring to him. That was the Zakin. Now the goal of our trajectory is to shape us into those kind of men. That's the beyond default saying. The plot of this trajectory, every trajectory has a plot where you connect the dots. The plot has 4 reality points. And a couple things. These reality points are what is true about life that must be accepted to live well. In other words, there are certain things that are going on in the world that are true, and that if we're going to live in a wise way, understanding the way the world works, we got to accept those truths whether we like them or not. Wisdom is really making choices in accord with reality that shapes my life for good. And I have good in quotes because good, as I understand it, is how God describes it in Genesis 1. He's making all things good. In Revelation, He's making all things good. Creation is being redeemed. That is the good. Now, one more thing. These reality points, these 4 reality points, are difficult to accept. For me, for you, for every man. Because they are disrupting, and they are scary, and they feel very negative. What are they? First one on this trajectory that's going to move us towards beyond default is this. Life is hard. There's a reason for the phrase between a rock and a hard place. Life is hard. Now, when we talk about life is hard, in essence, what we're saying from a Christian worldview is this. The world is not the way it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be this way. It's hard. It was never intended to be hard. It was intended to be good. How do we know that? Genesis 1 and 2, read that. That's the way the world is supposed to be. The Bible describes Genesis 1 and 2 really with the word shalom. Shalom means more than peace. Shalom is, this is the way the world is supposed to be. When it's all running on 8 cylinders, this is what it feels like. What is it? Well, you see in Genesis 1 and 2, God reigns justly. He's in charge. Also, life is full and life is fruitful. It is very good. And it's enjoyed with great gratitude and love. Relationships are connected. You know, one of the things I say that in marriage, when the most painful thing in marriage is when you feel a rupture in a relationship or in a friendship. When you feel that rupture, there's something there that takes place not only in our brain but deep in our guts that says, this hurts. We were not made for ruptures. There was no ruptures when the world is working the way it's supposed to work. Relationships are all connected with God, with each other, with myself, with creation. And creation honors man. Man was made to be the vicar of creation. God's, or the viceroy, God's representative, his image bearer. Man was to go out and subdue the world. And the world would cooperate with God, with the man. That's how God wired the world. But you come to Genesis 3, and now the world is not the way it's supposed to be. It's no longer good, now it's hard. Why? What happens? Well, anti-shalom. Everything is undone. Death reigns, not God. Life is empty, vanity, vanity, all is vanity, Solomon says in Ecclesiastes. And it's painful. It hurts. Relationships are no longer connected and secure. Now they're tenuous and disconnected. And creation no longer honors man. Creation shames man. It works against him, exposing his fears of inadequacy. Guys, when we say life is hard, we're mean. Life is not the way it's supposed to be. And because life is hard, every man, Christian or not, is going to ask this question. What am I going to do with the difficulties of life? The hardness of life that brings fear deep in my heart and soul, that brings shame to me, that brings all this pain. What am I going to do with all this as I face the difficulty and hardness of life? Well, typically, our default setting as men is one way is to reduce the hardness of life. And here what we say is, I can deal with this, I can manage it. So we take everything that's big and we reduce it all to this idea that it's not that big, I can handle it, I can manage it, I can fix anything. I had a friend who was part of the smoke jumpers in California, and their motto was, we can fix anything but the break of day. Another way we deal with the hardness and difficulty of life is we deny it. Oh, everything's good, I'm fine, nothing's going fine. You know, we just pretend that it's not there. And if it is there, maybe it'll go away. Another way is we blame. It's all your fault. If I can take all the fear and explain it as your fault or your fault or your fault, I can at least then have a sense of control over it. I know where it's coming from and why it's here, and I can explain it. And if I can explain it, then what? I can reduce it, and then I can fix it. And then there are the meds. All the different meds, that we take. A pill will make it better. I've been sick for 3 years, and it's like, well, isn't there a pill that can make this better? Why? Because I don't like this pain. There's some pain that just doesn't go away. Life is hard. I don't like that. I've got a pill to make it better. And then we'll fight against this reality. I don't have time for this. I hate this, and that's where a lot of our anger comes from, guys. Life is hard, and I don't like it. And let me say that all of this, dealing with life, the hardness of life, by reducing it, denying it, blaming meds, and fighting against it, all this would be called foolishness. Why? Because when we live like this, with reducing, denying, blaming meds, we are denying reality that life is hard. We're making choices. When we deny that reality, we'll make choices about living life that will go against the grain of the universe or the grain of reality. The reality is life is hard. That's the grain. When we live like life isn't hard, and tell ourselves that in all these ways, then we're going against the grain. And that will put us on a default trajectory of becoming a dirty old man, a lonely old man, a grumpy old man, whatever. Default old men need to hate others to expel all the years of negativity that is built up within them. Ever met an old man who's just so negative all the time? One of the things that is true is he just hates everybody. Because if I can hate you and you and you and you and you, and this group and that group and this race and that race, then I can somehow vomit all of this negativity inside of me and I can deal with it. Another thing default old men do is they play the victim to have an excuse for all their shameful failures. Well, it wasn't my fault they did this or this or this. One of the worst things that a man hates is to feel inadequate. And you never feel more inadequate in the presence of your own failure. And so if I can blame others as an old man, because guess what? You become old, you got a lot of failures in your wake. And if I can just blame others, then I don't have to face that. Another thing default old men do, whether they're a grumpy old man, a dirty old man, a lonely old man, a foolish old man, is they use their power for their own security and their own comfort. Why? To avoid the hardness of life, to avoid it all. You know, I've only got so much, I'm living on a fixed income now, so it's all going to be for me. I'm going to take care of myself. And so I will focus on the things that make my life happy. I'll focus on the pleasures that make my life happy. And I'll focus on status. That will give me security, because as you grow older, you become less and less secure. And so the tendency is to hold on to instead of give. And lastly, default old men harm their family and friends with their graceless inflexibility. You got your routine, and everybody's life revolves around your routine. Guys, it is the opposite of what God intends a mature man to live like. So, inconvenient reality number one, life is hard. It's not the way it's supposed to be. Romans 9 says the world is groaning. It says the Spirit is groaning in Romans 9, and guess what? It says we should be groaning as well. Why? Because life is hard and we are struggling. It's funny. Spirit groans, the world groans, and when we live as default old men, we're moving on that trajectory, we're finding ways to refuse to grow. Here's a note of wisdom. If we try to handle life, guess what, guys? Life will handle us. I'm sure we all have an experience where that has happened. But when we stop fighting and accept reality, kind of like what Mike was talking about, guess what? It lifts us out of the old way of simply living to survive. Because that's what this default projection is. A way I can survive in this world by using others and using God. And it opens us to a new way of thriving in the mystery of life, which I like but I don't like. I like because it's bigger than me. I don't like because I can't control it. But it also sets us on a beyond default trajectory. So, if we're going to be on this trajectory, the first point is we have to begin to realize now and begin to live in light of that. Life is hard. It's not the way it's supposed to be. Second, the second reality is this. Life is not about me. And neither is my life about me. It's not about me. Now, that's not the message we get from our society. If you live in a society, you breathe it, we breathe it in, and we suck it in all the time. The message in our society is life is all about you. I mean, you ever get Facebook messages?
Oh, gosh.
You know, there's all kinds of stuff on Facebook, but if you all boil it down, this is kind of your typical Facebook message. You should care what I'm doing, where I'm going, how I'm feeling, and when I'm having a BM, bowel movement. Why? Because I am important. Isn't it true?
Yeah.
That's the message we get from Facebook. Not only that, listen to some of the commercials. You know, get all the money you deserve. Let him take some of your money first, then you get all the money you deserve. You know, we deserve it. Am I that important that I deserve all the money I need? It could say, get all the money you need, get all the money you desire, get Get all the money you want, but get all the money you deserve means that I am up here and anything less is less than I should have. Why? Because I'm important. Here was a commercial for the Center of Contemporary Art. It's all about you, man. It's all, and guess what? We like that message, don't we? And then Nationwide is on your side. No, they're not. This gives you the idea that this big corporation, they know all about you. Why? And now they're going to come and they're going to take care of you. Why? Because you are important to them. The message we get from society is life is all about you. And where a lot of this coming today is the postmodern way of thinking. This is a good way to postmodern thinking here. Self is at the center of life, and everything revolves around self. And so if I am the center, if I'm my own creator, then I can create my own identity. And I can be whoever I want to be. Including if I am a boy and I want to be a girl, if I am a woman and I want to be a man, if I am white and I think I want to be black, I can just do it. I can construct whatever identity I want. Why? Because I'm my own creator. Well, if I'm my own creator, then the world revolves around who I have set myself up to be. And I determine truth. I become my own truth. Now, while your truth might be different because you're your own center, my truth, and so my truth is true and your truth is true, even though they're totally diametrically opposed. And then self-centered priorities. I form my own morality system. This is right and this is wrong. Because this is right, this is wrong, this is what I'll do, this is what I won't do. And then a self-centered way of life. And so here's how I go into life. I've got my creator, I've got my identity, I've got my worldview, I've got my morality, and so here's how I will make my choices, and here's how I will do relationships. That's the essence of the postmodern world. And you see all this happening now is in different, oh, and then this. It's not just, this is me, it's this is me with an attitude. Deal with it. Right? And so you see all this in the New York magazine, the Me Decade, they call it. Or Time magazine, the me generation. Where's all that coming from? It's coming from this way of thinking, a postmodern way of thinking that says, you are your own creator, you are your own center, you form your identity, you form your morality, you form everything, and then you live that out. And guys, all that's going on in our culture today, all of this that we feel and see, it's all the result of this. Because if everybody is their own creator and their own center, as long as you are cooperating with me, you're good. But the moment you're not, it says, I'm all important, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to take you down because you're getting in my way. That's what's going on in our world today. And so here's my question. Why is this way of living life and thinking about life, why has it become, over the last 20, 25, 30 years, the message of our culture? Life is all about you. Well, I think when we lose sight of the bigness of God, and that's what's really been disappearing more and more. When we lose sight of the bigness of God, we no longer see the smallness of ourselves. Give me an example. What is this building here? It's the Eiffel Tower. Anybody know how tall it is? I checked on before I came. 1,063 feet. That's a big building. That's tall. But you know what? it isn't so tall when you see it in perspective. What I'm saying is, when we don't have a view of God, this is how we see ourselves. Suddenly there's nothing else to compare it to, so we are the big man on the block. But when God is in view and in His bigness, suddenly we see the reality of our own smallness. And what I'm saying is this: when nothing in my world is bigger than me, I will climb over you and do whatever it takes to assert my own importance, to satisfy my own needs, whatever they are, and my own morality system and truth system tells me what I can do and I can't do. But one of the things it tells me is this: you exist to get your own way. Why? Because life is all about you. Now here's a note of wisdom. We all have a place in the universe, but it's not the central place. You have a place that's different than mine. I have a place that's different from yours, but we are not central. And the primary way that we will learn this lesson along our path as men through the story that God is writing in our lives is to learn this reality. When I put this down, I was reminded of that scene in, was the last Rocky? Not the very last one, but the one where he's working with his boy and he tells his boy, life is going to hit you hard. Remember that scene? And it's going to knock you down, and the only question is, isn't it going to hit you, but are you going to get up after you're hit? The primary way we learn that we are not life's center, and it doesn't revolve all around us, is by being hit hard and knocked down by life. When you get hit hard and knocked down time after time, guess what you begin to learn? Life isn't revolving around me, is it? I am not the center, something else is. A wise old man knows this, that life has its own agenda that doesn't include him at the center. Illustration, Job. In chapter 1, it describes Job as the most righteous man in all the earth. Chapter 42, it describes Job's progressive story is that he grew not just into a righteous old man, but a wise old man. Now, how did Job grow into a wise old man? Chapter 2 through 35, 36, somewhere around there. What happens to Job? Life hits him and knocks him down, and every time he gets hit harder and harder and harder. And he's facing life, he's dealing with life, he's arguing with God, he's shaking his fist at God. What does God do? God in His grace and mercy comes along and says, Job, just sit back for a minute. And let me tell you how I created everything. Let me tell you how big I am. Let me tell you, life, there's mystery to life. It's not black and white, cause and effect. And Job, if you can just learn how big I am, then you'll see how small you are, and then you'll be able to accept the mystery of life. And so what happens? Job listens. And at the end of God's speech, Job says, I repent in dust and ashes. I used to know about this, but now I've come to experience the reality of it. And Job became a Zayton, a wise old man. And it came through recognizing the truth and living in light of the truth that life is hard and I'm not the center of my life. It's not about me. The third point kind of tails off the second. I'm not in control. I like to think I'm in control. In fact, there's a phrase that you hear today in the self-help movement. You've got to take control of your life. Now, when they say that, what do they mean by that? Is that necessarily a bad thing? Well, I think what they're saying is this. You got to get control of your out-of-control mind or emotions or finances or bad habits or destiny. So I think they're saying something like that. And put like that, I think that's true on a practical level. We are to take responsibility for the way we think and the way we act and the way we do things and how we spend things. We've got to take control of those things on a practical level. But on a bigger existential life level, as we're talking, as Mike shared, guess what? I'm not in control of my life, and you're not in control of your life. Now, why is that belief that I am in control of my life, why is that a false belief? That's going against the grain of the universe. Well, time simply teaches. And that's why it takes time to become a wise old man. Wisdom cannot happen except through experience of pain and suffering, of success and failure. We learn about ourselves and God and life. Time teaches us that life is bigger than us. It disables our bodies. Mike? I have been sick for 3 years with something going on in my stomach. They thought it was cancer. They thought it was something else. They don't know what it is. I'm not in control. I would like to think I am. I like to think I can go to the doctor and he figure it out and I'm back in control. My body is out of control. And guess what? I can't do anything about it. It disappoints our dreams. You have dreams now and begin to live in light of that. Life is hard. It's not the way it's supposed to be. The second reality is this. Life is not about me. And neither is my life about me. It's not about me. Now, that's not the message we get from our society. If you live in this society, you breathe it, we breathe it in, and we suck it in all the time. The message of our society is life is all about you. I mean, you ever get Facebook messages?
Oh, God.
You know, there's all kinds of stuff on Facebook, but if you all boil it down, this is kind of your typical Facebook message. You should care what I'm doing, where I'm going, how I'm feeling, and when I'm having a BM, bowel movement. Why? Because I am important. Isn't it true?
Yeah.
That's the message we get from Facebook. Not only that, listen to some of the commercials. You know, get all the money you deserve. Let him take some of your money first, then you get all the money you deserve. You know, we deserve it. Am I that important that I deserve all the money I need? It could say, get all the money you need, get all the money you desire, get all the money you want, but get all the money you deserve means that I am up here and anything less is less than I should have. Why? Because I'm important. Here was a commercial for the Center of Contemporary Art. It's all about you, man. It's all about, and guess what? We like that message, don't we? And then Nationwide is on your side. No, they're not. This gives you the idea that this big corporation, they know all about you. Why? And now they're going to come and they're going to take care of you. Why? Because you are important to them. These college guys from the big schools. It was amazing. He was a good man, good father, committed believer. One day he went to work. They heard a thud in his office. 55 years old. Dead. No sign of anything. He just died. We're not in control, are we? We'd like to think we are. We're not in control. And there's the note of wisdom. Learning we are not in control, while that's painful and scary, it does do one good thing. It allows us to find the orbit that God has made for us that revolves around Him. When I am thinking I am still in control, I am still my own center, and I'm trying to get God to revolve around me. Guys, one of the things that we also learn is that we are not in control of the world around us, and neither are we in control of God. And we like to think we are sometimes, because if I live this way and I do this, then God kind of owes me, doesn't He? And we may say it, or we may just kind of deep on the inside believe it. And when God doesn't come through the way we think He should because of all the money we put in the vending machine and pulled the lever, we didn't get it, then we're mad at Him. Why? Because we think we can control God. But when we learn that we're not in control, it puts us in this place, our proper orbit. And it allows us to live with the grain instead of going against it. And living in proper orbit gives inner peace. What did Mike say when he began to take control and think he was in control? What would come up on the inside? Anxiety. When he would remember God and Jesus, what would happen? That inner peace. It brings a sense of destiny. Gosh, I'm about something bigger than I'm a part of the orbit. It's not around me, I'm around it. I've got a destiny to play. And if there's a God at the center and He has a destiny, He will then guide me and direct me along the way. And now I have a place in this universe. I know what I'm here for, and I know what I'm about. And I've got hope, and I've got direction. And guys, we cannot live without hope or direction. Anybody's familiar with the big book? Alcoholics Anonymous? What's the first step? I admit that I am powerless and my life is unmanageable. Or, I'm not in control. That's a hard lesson to learn. Richard Rohr says this: the first half of a man's life is all about learning self-control. Shut the computer off, do this, not do this, control my life. The second half of his life is all about learning to give up control. He says the first half of our life we're fighting the devil, and the second half of the life we're fighting who? Ourselves or God. We're going to take a break there. And we've been looking at these beyond default life-shaping realities. That's true. And we got one more to look at, and then we're going to kind of switch gears just at our conclusion to bring some hope to the direction, okay? We looked at life is hard. It's not the way it's supposed to be. Life is not about me. I have a place in God's universe, but it's not central. I am not in control. Dick was just sharing that he has a little house down in Florida. And he says, all we can do is wait and see what happens. It may hit it, it may not. It may demolish it, it may not. I got friends in Naples that they are pulled into Nashville last night, getting away. He has a big business down there with lots of equipment. And he was saying, we can just sit and hope nothing happens. We're not in control. And here's the last one. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. What is death? Well, death is our greatest fear. Hollywood has made lots of money off of our fear of death. They're called horror films. We fear death for 3 reasons. Death takes the people we love. It's the final goodbye. Even though we don't want to say goodbye, you got to say goodbye. My wife's father died last week. We were at his funeral over Labor Day. It's the final goodbye. He didn't want to say goodbye. Death steals all that makes life good. It does, doesn't it? It's the supreme form of transiency. Grass is here today and it's gone tomorrow. The good things of life are here. Think back as a kid. The things that you enjoyed as a kid that just gave your life a sense of security, a sense of goodness. They're not here anymore, are they? And what was good, the strength that we had as younger boys and men, and as we get older, it's all transient. It's all fading. I don't like that. That scares me. Death tells us that we're not immortal. That's really what it does. It's the unwanted truth teller. You're going to die. But what exactly is death? Well, the Bible says that death is both the consequence of sin and it is the penalty of sin. The wages of sin is death. Paul says in Romans 5, he says that death came through the sin of Adam, one man. And so death spread because of all sin. It tells us that death is both our enemy. It's not a friend. It's an enemy. It's not the way it's supposed to be. And it's the realm where evil reigns. Death is the great undoing of God's good creation. As I was thinking about that, just think. God, Adam, means earth or dust. We are earthlings. God took the dust and he formed it and he shaped it into a man and he breathed into it the breath of life and it was a living being, Adam. God said, "In the day you eat of it, you will die. For you were created as dust." And guess what? To dust you will return. My dad was cremated. He was in a bag about that big. All real fine dust, because there was kind of dust on the outside of the bag. That's the undoing of creation, isn't it? God created out of dust, and death undoes the creation, puts it back to dust. Death separates us from God, from others, and from the place He created for us to be. Really, from a sense of home. Where we can enjoy His presence, experience His blessing, and be fruitful as men. If you look at the way things are supposed to be, that's what death separates us from. But how do we, as men who are on a default setting typically, how do we deal with the spirit of death? Well, we find ways to avoid it, to deal with it, and to deny it, don't we? I can avoid thinking about death if I just maybe exercise more and I have the right diet. Or maybe if I go to some Chinese doctor that can give me some preventative stuff. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that's wrong. But I know of a person that thinks that if they're doing everything right, they should never really have to think about or worry about death. In fact, when I was in college, I worked out in a Y in Chicago, and there was a 77-year-old man, ex-boxer. I mean, he's your typical Chicago guy, and he was a little short Italian guy, and every day when I'd go up there, he would be working on his 700 sit-ups. He did 700 sit-ups every day, and he believed that as long as he was doing 700 sit-ups every day, he wouldn't have to worry about dying. We find ways to avoid it, to delay it, to deny it. Also, we find ways to try to overcome it. How? By leaving a legacy to my family, to this organization. Because then I will be what? Remembered. Becoming famous, or today infamous. If I go do something awful, they will remember me, not only me, but they will even remember my middle name. Did you ever notice that people in infamy always have a middle name? John Wilkes Booth, who's the guy who killed Kennedy. Lee Harvey Oswald. Wayne, last name is Gacy. They always talk about John Wayne Gacy. Yeah. I think we're going to overcome death. We become part of a heroic cause. If I can become something bigger than me, then I will somehow last in this cause. Or there's the cryonics. Everybody ever know what that is? It's, I'm going to put myself into this deep freeze, and hopefully 100 years or 200 years later, they'll figure out, what's wrong, and I can get fixed and live forever. People do that and spend a lot of money doing that. Why? Because we want to avoid death. But here's what I want to ask is this. What does the Bible say about this penchant of ours to avoid thinking about death? Jesus tells a parable about a man who avoided it. Luke 12, let me read it quickly. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops, and he said to himself, what should I do? I don't have room for all my crops. So he tore down his barns and built bigger ones. After building bigger barns, he sat back and said to himself, I have enough stored away for years to come, so just take it easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you, what? You fool. You will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for? And then Jesus says this. This is how it will be for anyone who stores up treasure for himself, but is not rich towards God. Now, what is Jesus saying here? What's the point he's making? He's not saying this. It's foolish to financially prepare for your future. He's not saying that, and we know that because in the Old Testament it talks about that all the time. Oh, sluggard, look at the ant, see how he prepares for the future and all of this, and be like him. You're unwise, you're a fool if you don't prepare for the future. So he's not saying that. What is he saying? He's saying this. It's foolish to plan our lives without pondering our death. It's foolish to plan our lives without pondering our death. Because if I ponder my death, it's going to what? Affect how I plan my life. When I don't think about my death, I just plan it like I'm always going to be here. Jesus is saying men who avoid thinking about their death grow into foolish old men. You fool, tonight your life is required of you. He didn't think about death. He was a fool in how he lived his life. Contrast that with what Psalm 90 says. Teach us to number our days so that we might grow how? In wisdom. Living with an awareness of death is the remedy for foolish living. That's what this psalm is saying. Put another way, pondering our death sets us on a trajectory for becoming wise old men, so that we might grow in wisdom. It sets us on that beyond default trajectory. So, what do we learn? We learn there are 4 essentials on a point points on this trajectory if we're going to grow into wise old men, Zaken, and not foolish old men, dirty old men, whatever, grumpy old men. That is the default setting. The 4 points were: life is hard, life's not about me, I'm not in control, and I'm going to die. Now, one observation as we get ready to close. Embracing these 4 realities is difficult, isn't it? I don't like to think about that. And it feels very negative. And you know what, guys? There's something I know about myself and men. We don't do good with difficult and negative. Not for very long, do we? And if we're going to grow into wise old men, we don't just think about it today and say, oh, that's nice, 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 and then forget about it and go back to the default setting. We have to hold on to these truths that feel very difficult and disrupting and scary and negative. So I want to close here by adding something in addition to these statements. To each of these reality statements, I want to tack on a clause, another part of the sentence, taken from God's Word that tells us some other things about reality in God's universe. First, it's true that life is hard, but guess what? Jesus says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Guys, God is not off in some galaxy someplace, uninterested about you. When you see the God that the Bible presents, God is a God who's looking for us. And He's looking for us, and He makes Himself available to us through Jesus. And Jesus comes to walk alongside us. When all I have is myself, life is hard, and I'm not sure I'm going to make it. But when I'm living with the reality that Jesus is present with me, I can now look up to Him and have pull me along. It's kind of like I have a Doberman pinscher. He's 5 years old, 90 pounds, and I run with her all the time. And when we started heading home, my pace usually goes down about from 9:30 to 9-minute miles. You know why? She wants to go home. She's pulling me along. Guys, life is hard, but Jesus says His yoke is easy. He wants to pull us along. It's true that life is not about me, but as Paul says in Galatians 2:20, because I've been crucified with Christ, I'm no longer living my own life, but I am living Christ's life who lives in me. There's something bigger for me than now just to find my own security so that I can survive. I can thrive, and I thrive by becoming part of what Jesus is and His life being lived out through me. It's in Him, Paul says, we live and move and have our being. We find our place in the universe through Christ. It's true that I'm not in control, but can I, for my worry, add a single moment to my life? I don't have to worry, Jesus says in this passage in Luke 12, because you have a Heavenly Father who loves you, who knows when all the little sparrows fall, He knows the numbers of hair on your head. He'll care for you. You don't have to be like the Gentiles who are always worried about keeping things under control. He says, seek first His kingdom, and everything else will be taken care of. I am not in control, but I am the son of one who is. And it's true, I'm going to die. But you know what? Neither for because of God's love for us in Christ, guys, we're going to turn to dust. But death is not final. We're going to be recreated or resurrected to life again. And that's why Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, "O death, where is your sting? O death, where is your victory?" Christ, through his resurrection, has given us the victory. Death is not final. Also, when we live in God's love, we can be free from the fear of death. I think it's Hebrews 5 says, He set free, Jesus set free all who live their lives as slaves to the fear of death or dying. 1 John says, when we understand how much God really loves us and we have that mature sense of love, mature love casts out all fear. And when we hold on to Christ, He becomes the bridge at death that takes us from one realm of being to another. Jesus said, "He who believes in him who sent me, that person has crossed over from death to life." Jesus truly is the bridge that will usher us from this world to the next as we wait for God to restore this world and us be brought back. So life is hard. My life is not about me. I'm not in control. I'm going to die. Men who don't embrace this, they set themselves on a default to become adult boys. You know why I say boys? Because guess what boys believe? Life is pretty good. They haven't lived life, has it? Life is really about me. Because it has been ever since you were born. I'm in control of my life. I can do whatever I want. And I'm never going to die. I'm going to live forever. That's what a boy believes. Guys, as we continue to believe that, we grow into foolish old men. As my grandma used to say, there's no fool like an old fool. And we put ourselves on that trajectory. If we're going to grow into the kind of man, the Zakin that God wants, we have to embrace these realities as hard as they are, but also embrace along with them those realities that says, God, we are not alone in this world. God is with us. And when we embrace these realities, we move from the default setting to beyond default to mature Zakin. And while the men who don't embrace this turn inward and become graceless, selfless old fools, we turn outward who embrace this trajectory, becoming gracious, life-giving, wise old men. Every man is going to grow old. You can't stop that. But the question is, what kind of old man can you become? We can't stop this. We can determine this. Next time, November 11th, Sainthood, most important day. Guys, if you want any more information about Awaken Heart, here's our office number, talk to one of us. But Mark, we're going to come up and quickly bring our time to a close. And but hopefully this is helpful, and thank you for allowing me to share.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. Everybody told you that life journey was at one time was just a lost, scared little boy, and I was also pretty clueless. One time my wife said, she literally said it, it's all about you. It's always been about you. I didn't feel like a man. And that brought me to my knees. Because I loved him. I didn't know how to keep him. And the only way that I ever learned how to do it, and Mike's like kind of says it too, there's a movie we often watch, My Life. It says dying is a really hard way to learn about life and how to live. There are better ways than learning that way. it really is the purpose of why we get together, why we exist, how God's used us and brought us together as a group. We're really here to help men to learn along that journey, that there's a better way with less destruction to learn about what God's up to in life, to learn through death, to learn about some other things. And it's really a bunch of men in this room that helped me to learn how to love my wife first. God said, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. What? It means I have to die to myself. It's about me. But if we live by God's design, you actually feel more like a man. You actually feel bigger when you give yourself away. And that's how God designed us. We want to help you as much as we can along that journey. And all I can say about this guy, he's a great example of it. I thought as you were talking, I go, if I could describe you in one word, before, he was the antagonist for life. But now you know what he is? Because God's great work and other people in relationships, you're an ambassador for Christ. It thrills me to see that God can do that to a man's life, that there's always hope. And you can be a part of that, and you can be involved in other guys' life. And Ken is just a great friend. And you know what? We all need that friendship. We all need those brothers. We all need relationships around us. Why? Because we think we can do it ourselves. I'm an example that it's not possible. Another thing my wife even said, that I had lots of great efforts, but none of my efforts produced any good results. Because I was really doing all my efforts for me. So we want to help you in any way that we can. That's why we're here. Like we said, one way we can help is if you want to have the notes for today, so you can remind yourself, tell your friends, tell your sons, tell any other man, it's hard to get the message. If you take this card on the way out, you can just put your name at the top. If you already have your email, that's great. Put your email on it. And just put down where it says general information, just write the word notes. And we'll make sure that they get sent to you for today.
They're on the table.
They're on the table? Okay, great. And another way that we're helping men all the way around, and that's why we graciously accept all donations. It's not because we're trying to build a future storehouse of all of our monies. We use all the money we get because we believe that the message that men needs to hear is worth every dime we have and every ounce that we have. Because if that message isn't out there, what do men do? Go back to the default mode. And that doesn't produce life, that usually produces destruction. And so that's what we're all about. So we accept that. Another way that we're doing that for the long term, if you want to grab one of these on the way out, with these on the tables too, the survey.
John has it.
John has it?
I have it.
It's a survey, and it's going to come out in a book form. Scott's work on this, and a whole bunch of other good things. Don't have time to explain. But it's a survey about the state of masculinity, the state of how you think spiritually. It's just really good. It's going to be used in some other good ways to help get the message out more for men. So if you want to take that and be part of it, it's pretty cool. It's very...
I would appreciate it. Take about 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, pretty
If
cool.
you haven't done it, I appreciate it. And it's just a self-address kind of little stamp. You just put it in the mail.
Another way we want to help if we can, because along this journey someplace, this woman comes along, but we really don't know what to do with them. I mean, that's so true. So we have marriage weekends that are part of our ministry, a bunch of other things. I'm just kind of hitting some highlights. But if you really want to risk, grab one of these brochures and say, hey, honey, I don't have a clue, but I'm going to do something. I'm not going to go back to my default mode. I'm going to do something. So if that's something that we can help with your journey, feel free. And I think the last thing that I want to say is that the marriage weekends are actually still a couple of weekends coming up here in September. We got one in November. I think that's most of it. I'm trying to hurry through it to make sure we respect your time. Miss anything significant, John?
Did you say it's the September?
Yeah, we got it. September, with my glasses on, 22nd.
Great.
So was that 2 weeks? There's a couple openings for the marriage week, and then we got some in November. But Scott, I appreciate it sharing that because the message needs to be heard. Just a question to you, so you don't have to just leave empty. We'll take the last second. Anything stirred that's touching that you want to ask a question for, or you just want to get out instead of just keep it in? I'm sure there's lots going on, because it certainly reminded me that my orbit was around me. But if you don't want to take the time to share that now, any one of us that are in one of these crazy looking shirts, feel free to talk to us, because like I said, we just want to be here to help you along your journey in the place that we can. So anything just in case? If there's just something that, oh my gosh, I've got to say something? Don't feel that pressure. Okay, I probably pressured you even to ask that. Well, let me pray then if there's nothing, and we'll see you, hopefully, everybody on the 11th. God, we acknowledge that really is sometimes way too much about ourselves. We acknowledge that we don't have all that it takes. We acknowledge, Lord, that the journey is hard, but you're with us. Thank you for loving us no matter what. Thank you that you make it even possible at all. Thank you that you have a bigger story for us than we could ever imagine. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your truth. Lord, thank you for men and relationships, people like Mike and people, Lord, who've done great work. So we just give you ourselves the best we can for your glory. In Christ's name, amen. Thanks, guys.